Welcome, dear viewers, to my spine-tingling horror story channel. I'm thrilled to have you join me as we journey into the world of the unknown. Brace yourselves for a relentless cascade of spine-chilling tales that will haunt your every thought. Keep your eyes glued to the screen and ensure you hit that subscribe button to stay connected with our descent into the darkness. The nightmares are about to unfold, and it all starts now. Mr. and Mrs. White were a simple couple, living a modest life in a small town. They had a son, Herbert, who was working as a clerk in the city. One night, they were visited by their friend, Sergeant Major Morris, who had brought with him a strange and disturbing object, a mummified monkey's paw. Morris told the Whites that the paw had belonged to an old fakir who had cursed it so that it would grant 3 wishes, but with terrible consequences. He warned them not to use it, but Mr. White was intrigued. He had always dreamed of wealth, and he couldn't resist the temptation to make a wish. That night, Mr. White made his wish for £200. The next morning, he received a telegram informing him that Herbert had been killed in a railway accident. His insurance payout was £200. Mr. White was devastated by his son's death, but he was also filled with guilt. He realized that his wish had come at a terrible price. He and Mrs. White tried to forget about the monkey's paw, but it was too late. The paw had already cast its spell on them. Mrs. White was consumed by grief. She couldn't bear the thought of living without her son. One night, she made a wish for Herbert to come back. The next morning, a knock came at the door. Mr. White opened it to find a pale and haggard figure standing on the doorstep. It was Herbert. He was alive, but he was not the same. He was cold and distant, and he spoke in a strange, monotone voice. Herbert stayed with his parents for a few days, but he was clearly not well. He would disappear for hours at a time, and he would often wake up screaming in the night. Mr. and Mrs. White were terrified, but they didn't know what to do. One night, Mr. White heard Herbert leaving the house. He followed him, and he saw him enter the graveyard. Mr. White watched in horror as Herbert dug up his own grave and climbed inside. The next morning, Mr. White returned to the graveyard, but Herbert was gone. He searched for hours, but he couldn't find him. He returned home, heartbroken and defeated. Mr. White knew that the monkey's paw had claimed another victim. He threw the paw into the fire, but it refused to burn. He tried to smash it with a hammer, but it was unbreakable. In the end, Mr. White was forced to live with the consequences of his wishes. He had lost his son, and he knew that he would never be the same again. The monkey's paw was a malevolent force, and it had wreaked havoc on the White family. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of wishing for things that we don't truly want. Thank you for joining us on this night of terror. Don't let the fear end here. Make sure to subscribe for more spine-tingling nightmares in the future. Until then, may your dreams be forever haunted by the echoes of our chilling tales.